everyone.
This is Hazel Shane Caral.
This is Shani Kim Josue.
This is Sofia Huban.
This is Micaela Alomia.
This is Jexel Santiago. So this is our video lecture project, which is our topic is all about the classical Christian tradition. So the content of our project or our report is divided into 4 chapters. So the first chapter is the general introduction. The second one is overview of the key ethical issues. The third one is classical Christian tradition, wherein that is our topic. And the last one is perspectives on the key issues. So to start with, to determine the nature of teaching, one must determine the nature of the student. To determine the nature of the student, one must determine the nature of reality. The understanding of these things determines a person's philosophy of education. That is, one must think about the truth behind education before thinking in how to practice education. So we shall start with truths, work down to their implications, and then incarnate these truths in practices. So this research or this report is all about the classical Christian tradition, wherein we will provide thorough abstraction and materials for you to fully recognize its definition. Our task as a group is to promote ideas regarding this matter and for you to identify which of these concepts presents great deals under the classical Christian tradition. Also, the main purpose of this paper or this report is to present the principle and issues in the area of ethics offered by philosophers starting from the classical to contemporary times. And this is the third the third group in a 3-volume devoted to basic subject matters of philosophy. So the first volume or the first 2 volumes dealt respectively with the philosophy of man and metaphysics. So here in metaphysics, certain fundamental themes relevant to all aspects of the philosophic enterprise will be discussed. This theme centered on the basic question of what is it to be or to exist. It is also involved in being where such realities as causality, change, and contingency, and the foundation of being was seen to be the existence of God. While here in the philosophy of man, the volume treated such central issues for man as the question of his unity in being, his spiritual nature, his destiny, and the character of his knowledge. So these 2 philosophical sciences are called speculative branches of philosophy because their main thrust is toward finding truth and satisfactory answers to the questions they raise. So in speculative science, in metaphysics, the question is, what is it to be? While in philosophy of man, the question for that is, what is it to be a man? So although the conclusion of the speculative science will have an indirect effect of the conduct of man, they do not immediately set themselves to determine what being should be or what man should be. So in this case of ethics, however, there is a practical emphasis for the ethics, it is a non-speculative science. So non-speculative science seeks normative principles of conduct. Also, it presupposes some principles from metaphysics and some notion of man's nature from the philosophy of man. But that is mainly concerned with what man should do with what is action or conduct as a man should be. More fully expressed, ethics is practical philosophy that seeks to find some of principle or of order for those human actions for which we are freely responsible and over which we have any choice or direction on our part. So additionally, approaches to morality will also be discussed all throughout our report. So here is the approaches to morality. So the moral philosopher is concerned with the human acts with those actions in which we are free and responsible, but he is not alone in this concern. So the psychiatrist, theologian, and psychologist have their own interest, deliberative and free human action. The moral philosophers differ from each of them from the point of view of which that uniquely is. So here in the psychiatrist, their view is that the moral philosopher is not concerned with the analysis of the subconscious motivation of any individual or the expositions of the emotions and feelings that accompany the actions of individuals in their lives. On the other hand, theologian or the views of theologian is that it uses the content of revelation as the source for his normative reality. And lastly, in psychologists' view, they are interested in the measurement and analysis of the emotions and complexes that an individual may have. He is not concerned with establishing a systematic structure of the way men ought to act. So this latter concerns the discovery of, by the reason how men ought to act, identifies the precise viewpoint of a moralist. So moving on to John Locke. John Locke is a famous English philosopher who once observed that men thought creatively long before Aristotle wrote his logical treatises of how to think. And it is the same observation can be made about ethics. There were morals long before there was any science of morality. The students brings to his formal study of ethics his experience of having made and continuing to make moral decisions. Also, the very fact of being human gives him practical practice of the area of ethics. But the advantage of continuing the experience of moral decision is not enough. Moral decisions, it requires analysis on the philosophical level, and every man wants to feel some rational consistency in the kinds of deliberate actions he experiences. So he is not content to choose to act without reflection. He wants to see whether such choices are warranted to perhaps are the best moral choices he could make. He added that the philosophers presented in this paper have furnished explicit analysis of these moral choices. So in making the plan of this series, this analysis reflects a floristic approach to morality. However, even with the differences that do exist, certain similarities appear in the cave position considered in each section of the book. And we have also tried to be more comprehensive when it comes to the exposition of our topics that is associated with collecting the most possible source to distribute. Readers will also be guided to other references that should be consulted for further information on the key ethical issues.
So hi everyone, my topic for today is the overview of the key ethical issues. Next one. So the chapter 2 value in individuals accepted standards of right and wrong. The first one is value is sometimes defined as the subject of human desire and striving. It is a technical name as axiology from the Greek word logos in science. So in the study of the nature of value, axiology are the evaluation and the kinds of things that are valuable. So the theory of this is the philosophy of goodness or value in the widest sense of these terms. So value in ethics and social sciences is that denotes the degree of importance of something or action, with the aim of determining which actions are best to do, or what way is the best live. Normative ethics and ethics, or to describe the significance of different actions. Next one. Okay, so the classical Greek, the life lived according to the reason is the value or the end view proper to human striving. That includes the first one is naturalist. It feels the best possible fulfillment of the individual society is the attained through the techniques of the behavioral science. So, naturalist is the theory that relates the scientific methods to philosophy by affirming that all beings and events in the universe, whatever their inherent character may be, are natural. So the second one is the Christian, finds values in the good life leading to union with God. So when you say Christian, it is affiliated with God. So the last one is the existentialist, which is the value that exists in the authenticity of an individual, taking his life and his commitments seriously and with full responsibility. So this one is a modern philosophical movement stressing the importance of each person, experience and responsibility, and the demands. Next one. Okay, so the next one is who is Immanuel Kant? He is a German philosopher of the Enlightenment, stating that experience fact of duty or responsibility implies that we are free. He was also a deontologist in that he placed the institution of moral obligation at the very center of his ethics. So Kant answers that we do our moral duty when our motives is determined by a principle, recognized by reasons rather than the desire for any expected consequences or emotional feelings which may cause us to act the way we do. It's the will. It is defined as that which provides the motives for our actions. So the saying that he is indeed famous with his quote, I ought, therefore I can. So in my own understanding, this quote means that if you know and if you're true to yourself and you trust yourself, everything is possible. So next one. So the last one is the obligation. Obligation is the claim made upon us by the reason that some things are to be done and deserve praise, whereas others are to be avoided and deserve blame. It is also clearly related to the notions of responsibility and freedom. Deontology is a technical name for the part of ethics that deals with obligation. Next. So the natural law are all the standards of right and wrong conditioned solely by the cultural norms by which one lives. So there are two kinds or like dahil duha ka buok na kanang koan isig ka side. The first one is the affirmative reply, which is the cultural relativist, and the next the other side is the opposed, which is the Thomas and Aristotelians. So the first one is the affirmative reply. This their view is emerge of novel situation as a perpetual condition of an evolutionary universe, and so cannot grant that any standard based on unchanging human nature can be adequate. So this means that every human being is not enough to change the novel situation and also the condition of the cultural norms. Their standards, the standard of each human being, their perspectives or their thinking is not enough to change the cultural norms. And the second one is the opposed, which is the Thomas and Aristotelians. They said that call on the natural law theory that states that man himself is capable of setting up standards of morality based on his own nature. So kani siya kay it means na kanang ang own standards sa katao, ang own perspective sa usa ka tao, it really depends like the changing and the morality standards is really depend on each person, like each human being. This lang mag-depend kung asa sila or like sa ubang tao, nagdependa sila kung ang silang perspective ana nga butang. So next one. So virtue. Virtue is the power of more action that enables man to act with ease and order in some area of his life. The Greeks sought wisdom in philosophy and the prudence and justice in politics. In this part, virtue between politics and philosophy is being compared. Philosophy, wisdom, politics, prudence, and justice, it is being given emphasizes from classical to the present. The existentialist stresses courage in the face of responsibility. So, nakoy for example like sa kuan sa court of justice like in ana, di ba kay magtigi jud ang kanang kuan virtue like ang ilang values or like unsa pa nang norms dira sa kanang kuan justice kay for example if sa ubang tao sakto na pero sa ato ang own nga kanang sa atong own nga batas or sa atong own nga kanang political rules, di ba, wrong na. So, magtigil siya ang duha, like, the virtue and the justice is being compared not until today. So, that's all. Thank you.
So right now we are going to talk about our main topic, which is the classical Christian tradition. So next, please. What is classical Christian tradition? So it is the traditional and historic model of education that began with the emergence of the Asian Christian faith in the early Middle Age and continued to develop throughout the centuries, maintaining several persisting themes such as the teaching of the seven liberal arts, natural science, great books, and cultivation of wisdom and virtue in human beings. So, classical education promotes a keener understanding of the unique interplay between the science and the humanities. So, the term transcendental taxonomy coined by the Newman Society refers to the classical approach education which involves asking the great questions of Western civilization. The seven liberal arts were codified by the 400s AD as the arts of grammar, logic and rhetoric, and mathematical arts of arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. Next, please. So, what is liberal Christian tradition? So, seven liberal arts. There were seven liberal arts which were the subject of secular education in the Middle Age and Renaissance, but were codified in late human antiquity. They were divided into trivium, meaning the threefold way, and the mathematical arts of quadrivium, the fourfold way. These arts are grammar, logic, and rhetoric, the quadrivium, geometry, arithmetic, astronomy, and music. So, in the arts, they are usually represented by female personifications who carry attributes to aid recognitions. Grammar has two pupils, or in the 17th century, waters a plant, logic has a snake, rhetoric a sword and book, geometry a pair of compasses, arithmetic a table with figures, astronomy a globe, and music plays musical instrument. So, next please. These arts were considered to be a way or path to skill and wisdom, and appropriate for anyone who wishes to be free to serve and flourish. The arts were called liberal from the Latin liber, meaning free, arts because they bequeathed and preserved such as freedom to those who studied them well. Classical education embraces the concept of education, the whole child, and the notion that children are more than their standardized test scores. Classical schools are unique among schools. Choices, options for the three main reasons: a virtuous education, a content-rich curriculum, and traditional classroom environment. So, the first of our five philosophical perspective is that one with the longest tradition in the Western world. The statement is frequently made that modern civilization is found in Greek philosophy, Christian theology, Roman law, and modern science. Within Christian philosophy are included the value of Greek philosophy and the profound religious consciousness of Hebrew civilization. In our study of moral philosophy, attention must first be given to the extraordinary and brilliant contribution of the Greeks under the nature of traditions. Next, please. So the first one is the first one of nature of tradition is Socrates from 470 to 399 BC. So one of the originators of moral system declared in the Apology that unexamined life is precisely the life not worth living. The significant value of Socrates contributes in his confidence in the mind's ability to attain degree of moral wisdom in the conduct of life. So the significant value of Socrates contributes his confidence in the mind's ability to attain degree of moral wisdom in the good life. Man should also hope to come up with understanding in which to guide himself the path of his own fulfillment. So next, please. Next is Plato. So Plato is 427 to 347 BC, made solid contribution in the formation of our moral consciousness. So Plato is a contributions in the formation of our moral consciousness. But the Greek masterpiece of moral inquiry is Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, which treats good moral problems in terms of capacities as well as the potentialities of men to do good. The next one is Aristotle, 384 to 322 BC, posted the idea that happiness is the final end of the human aspirations and that it can be arrived at only by use of the reason. So, Aristotle is characterized by a strong devotion to reason. The influence of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle was to create that day, we think, the need of order and the value of philosophical analysis that almost any other people. So next, please. Next is Saint Thomas Aquinas from 1225 to 1274 was clearly impressed by the possibility of reasons could achieve solid and respectable results in the field of morality. Aquinas lived in the height of the age of faith. By his principle, the truth is one whatever is really true in faith and science will never really conflict. He was able to push his own intellectual pursuits to the very limit. So Aquinas has no mere echo of the Greek mind. He informed that Greek mind with the Christians' commitment and developed areas in which the Greeks were really explicit. For example, the need for self-love. Since God loves all men, it is important they imitate Him by proper love for themselves. Divine providence is not operative in Aristotle's theory, whereas it is a basic assumption for Aquinas.
Hello, this is Sophia Huban and I will talk about the perspective on the key issues. The question is, what is the supreme value in the classical Christian tradition, and what do these philosophers see as the object towards which human beings strive and that they desire? This will be addressed for further discussions of our topic. The Greek and Christian answered the question of value in two ways. First, they were concerned with finding as a subject that faculty in man that is his highest or most valuable faculty, or by faculty they meant the power of acting in some determined or specific way. The eye is the organ or instrument for the faculty of seeing. The Greeks and most of the Christian philosophers were convinced that the faculty of the greatest value in man is his intellect, the power whereby he can engage in reasoning from ideas or concepts and make rational judgment. The object that will most fulfill the faculty or power of reason. In seeking to establish that the most valuable power of a man is his reason, the Greeks, especially Plato and Aristotle, asked what there is in a man that must be satisfied before he can be happy. They generally agreed that man can be properly satisfied only by some object that is proper to his spiritual character. They saw man's special satisfaction to be necessarily a fulfillment of what is special in a man. This they took in mind or soul, which represents to them what is best in man. Therefore, man's spiritual striving must be satisfied before man is satisfied. Most of the philosophers in this tradition saw the presence of intellect, the power to understand the world and to express that in understanding ideas and sentences as to appetite or human tendency that is the prime area for human satisfaction, fulfillment, or happiness. John Stuart Mill is a utilitarian philosopher of the 19th century who stated that it would be better to be a sad Socrates than a satisfied pig. In other words, man as a subject simply cannot be satisfied without making into account the perfection of his reason and his power of free choice. To be a man and not to exercise responsibility or seek the values of the examined and reasonable life would be to live without exercising one's highest and most distinctive power. The satisfied pig would not be aware of his own satisfaction or able to reflect and enjoy it consciously. Closely related to this intellect is the will. Will, whereby one actively desires the good that one has to come to know as the result of the ability of the intellect. Man is ordered to the possession of the true and the good. The Christians concurred with the Greeks in insisting that man cannot be satisfied unless his highest seeking, that of his intellect and will, is satisfied. Thus, a rational character appears in the ethics of his tradition. As the Greeks and Christians view the world and a man, they classified being in a hierarchical manner. For them, the lowest beings in the world of sense experience consistence of the minerals, or in terms of four primary elements: the earth, air, fire, and water. These elements lack, among other things, the essential quality of life, a quality of perfection which plants possess. A being with life is considered more perfect than one without because of its power of reproduction of its kind and for growth from a germinal to a mature state, and its ability to engage in nutrition, to master the mineral elements, and to absorb them into its own identity. But even though the plant is considered more perfect than the zone or primary elements, it lacks the perfection of life that is possessed by the sentient animal, which has the greater ability to live because of its powers of locomotion, imagination, instinct, and organic sensation. When the Greek and Christians viewed man, they saw him as possessing the power of abstract reasoning, whereby he is able to master technique and gain knowledge that will produce the arts and sciences. This power of reasoning is higher in kind than any possessed by stone, plant, or animal. It is the distinguishing character and essential quality of man. In Plato, this immutability, which is the eternal character and permanence, is seen in the eternal idea of justice, truth, goodness, and beauty, though it would be incorrect to think of Plato as naively supposing that these ideas share a kind of spatio-temporal existence in another world. Their realm and spiritual in character, man reaches his highest values when he is able, by an act of direct intuition, to see what truth and justice and beauty are in themselves. The steps by which these insights unto beautiful itself are attained and described by Socrates in the Symposia. For Aristotle, man's fulfillment is gained by contemplation, but he did not specify any object that will itself be the perfect object of contemplation. Next, we have obligation. By the use of it, man sees himself obligated to do certain things, to pay back his debts, to deal fairly with his friends. Obligation, or the possession of duties, it is a moral demand imposed by man's season to assess his own life situation. Reason itself does not create his demand, but rather by reason man is able to recognize what is due to others and to himself. Obligation, as described in the readings that follow, treats of right and duties. A right is a moral power that imposes an obligation on another to respect it. Thus, every man who has basic needs for food and survival has a claim of the recognition by others of his needs. Correlated to the knowledge of obligation is the fact of freedom of choice. One cannot be blamed for doing what he could not avoid under any circumstances. Likewise, one cannot claim praise for what was done automatically and without freedom of any kind. This condition of freedom in the face obligation is an essential ingredient in the classic Christian tradition. It is not enough that one should act in a specific way. One has to decide whether to follow his reason, though reason may command. Choice of the reasonable deed does not necessarily follow. The classical tradition also emphasizes the spiritual interior quality of free assent. Excuse me. Socrates affirmed in the Phaedo that his limbs, if left to themselves, would carry him fast from his prison, but because of his principle, he was able to make an inner, spiritual, and free commitment to stay there. In his description of obligation, Aquinas restated in a Christian context much of what was central to the tradition of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. For him, the ultimate source of all obligation is the eternal law. The divine plan, all creation proceeds from God, but God chooses to make man such that can, by the use of his reason, come to recognize his obligation in life. In the structure of the moral act, Aquinas saw another sign of the close way in which the human creature is able to participate in the plan of God. In morality, man participates in the eternal law of God by operating his moral life according to reason. Man is not a passive recipient of any ready-made laws, but he brings himself to know the law and to formulate it by the power of reason.
So the next one is natural law. Aristotle and Aquinas had confidence that man could discover some objective, universal, and necessary laws of morality. They considered law as an ordering or some kinds of whereby the pattern of activity of a being reaches its perfection. They were convinced that the beings below man, such as animals, plants, and minerals, are directed to their perfection, or proper final way of existence, by a principle basic to them. Such a principle of activity is called their substantial form. Thus, they thought of the primary elements as having certain tendencies because of their form. So these are the primary elements and their form. So the first element is air. Air tended to be dry and light. The second element is earth. It is tended to be dry and heavy. The next element is fire. It is tended to be hot and dry. The last element is water. It is tended to be cold and wet. The primary elements act as they do because of the nature they possess. Next. So, for man, the presence of freedom as a result of reason makes the natural law not an externally imposed necessity. Rather, man becomes aware of his nature and the activities proper to him by his autonomous act of reason. The natural law theme in this tradition is closely related to the notion of a standard or norm of morality. Granted that the man is to discover the pattern of his morality by the use of his reason, the question remains whether any model or standard exists against which man may rationally measure his action. So, man's nature is considered as dependent and contingent on God, who is constantly conserving man in being and is himself the fulfillment of man's striving. The actions of man should reflect relevance toward God as the author or receiver of life. Next, please. So, the first general principle of reverence toward God is found by measuring man's nature in terms of its source and end. The second principle can be found by comparing man to his fellow man. So, each man is seen as capable of realizing that all human beings have the same essential needs. An individual should respect on the other people the same basic needs that he has in himself. So, next please. So the next one is virtue. Virtue in the Greek or Christian sense consists of qualities of excellence whereby man is rendered more perfect as man. The qualities of excellence enable man to act with ease and order in given area of human existence. So in Christian tradition, the seven heavenly virtues combine the four cardinal virtues of prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude with the three theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity. So the first four virtues are called the cardinal virtues because they play a primary role in our formation. They are prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. So the first cardinal virtue is prudence. Prudence is a virtue that takes time to acquire, but because it governs the other virtues, it is one of the most important virtues we can possess. So the second cardinal virtue is justice. So in Christian moral theology, justice is a quality or habit which perfects the will and inclines it to render to each and to all what belongs to them. So the object of the virtue of justice is the other person's right, whether natural or bestowed by church faith. Justice requires that all persons should be left in the free enjoyment of all their rights. So the third cardinal virtue is temperance. In the Christian religion, temperance is a virtue that moderates attraction and desire for pleasure and provide balance in the use of created goods. So according to St. Thomas, he calls it a disposition of the mind which binds with passion. So temperance is believed to combat the sins of gluttony. And also, according to Aristotle, it defines temperance as the ability to act rationally in relation to pleasure and pain. So the last cardinal virtue is fortitude. It is commonly called courage. However, it is different from what we often think of. Fortitude is always reason and reasonable. The cardinal virtue of fortitude involves practicing what is good and just when it is difficult or even dangerous. So here are the seven heavenly virtues. So the first heavenly virtue is chastity. It is also known as purity. It is a virtue related to temperance. Someone who is chaste refrains either from sexual activity considered immoral or any sexual activity according to their state of life. So the second heavenly virtue is temperance. It is defined as moderation or voluntary self-restraint. It is typically described in terms of what individual voluntarily refrains from doing. So temperance includes restraint from revenge by practicing non-violence and forgiveness. Restraint from arrogance by practicing humility and modesty. Restraint from excesses such as extravagant luxury or flirting. And lastly, it is restraint from rage or craving by practicing calmness and self-control. So the next heavenly virtue is charity. It is the voluntary giving of help to those in need. As humanitarian act and motivated by self-interest, there are a number of philosophies about charity often associated with religion. So the next one is religion. It is carefulness and persistent effort or work. It is one of the seven heavenly virtues. It is indicate of a work ethic, the belief that work is good in itself. So the next heavenly virtue is kindness. It is the type of behavior marked by acts of generosity, consideration, or concern for others without expecting praise or reward. So the next heavenly virtue is patience. It is the ability to endure difficult circumstances. Patience may involve perseverance in the face of delay, tolerance of provocation without responding in disrespect or anger. This perseverance, when under strain, especially when faced with longer-term difficulties, or being able to wait for a long amount of time without getting irritated or bored. So patience is the level of endurance one can have before disrespect. It is also used to refer to the character trait of being. So the last heavenly virtues is humility. It is the quality of being humble. In a religious context, humility can mean a recognition of self in relation to a deity, and subsequent submission to said deity is a member of the religion. So outside of the religious context, humility is defined as being unself, a liberation from consciousness of self, a form of temperance that is neither having a pride or indulging in self-deprecation. So that's all.